The Nancy Drew Files, Case Number 1, Secrets Can Kill by Carolyn Keene. Chapter 10. Nancy pushed her sloppy Joe aside and reached for Daryl's hand across the cafeteria table. I need a favor. Just ask, Daryl said with a smile. What? You need a ride home after school? Not exactly, Nancy answered, looking mysterious. I lucked out. This morning my dad surprised me with a new Mustang GT convertible. Daryl rolled his eyes. You've got to be kidding. The deal is I pay him back when the insurance money comes through, Nancy grinned sheepishly. Plus 20 years allowance, I've been told. Poor baby, Daryl teased her, leaning close enough to brush his lips against her ear. So what's the favor? You want me to test drive your new toy? Nancy didn't tease back. No, she said, forcing herself to pull back from Daryl's handsome face. I want to tell you something, but you have to promise not to breathe a word of it to anyone. I can keep a secret, detective. Promise. They were alone at a table in the furthest corner of the cafeteria. Any of the kids who happened to glance their way probably thought they were having a private lovers' talk. But love was the furthest thing from Nancy's mind at that moment as she quietly told Daryl about Jake Webb's blackmail videotape. When she finished, she sat back and sipped her iced tea, waiting for Daryl's reaction. But Daryl must have been so stunned he couldn't think of anything to say. He just stared at her with wide, dark blue eyes, his face almost blank. It's okay to be shocked, Nancy said. I was, and I'm the detective. Yeah, Daryl shook his head and whistled softly. Wow, I am shocked. I mean, it's unbelievable. It is, unless you've seen the tape. So what are you going to do with it? Daryl asked. Turn it over to the police? Nancy shook her head. I guess I'll have to give it to them pretty soon, but since Mr. Parton is letting me handle this my way, I'd like to work on my own for just a little longer. For now, the tape's going to stay safe at home where I can keep an eye on it. Daryl nodded. I guess you think one of those kids killed Jake, huh? I don't know what I think yet, Nancy admitted. I don't want to believe it at all. But they're the only ones on the tape. Isn't that what you said? Daryl asked quickly. Yes, but somehow Nancy sighed. Jake really blew it for everybody, didn't he? Daryl looked sympathetic and concerned, just the way Ned would have reacted, Nancy thought. Then Daryl leaned across the table and gave her one of the sexiest looks. Don't take this wrong, detective, but be careful, okay? Warmed by Daryl's concern and support, not to mention his touch, Nancy spent the rest of the afternoon, in between classes, tracking down the 3 stars of Jake's videotape. She found Hal in the library, just beginning a paper that she happened to know was due in 2 days. Hi, she whispered just as she joined him at the study table. I thought you'd be finished with that by now. Everybody says you're a real whiz. Hal gave her a nervous smile and shrugged. Even whizzes get behind sometimes. Well, I guess you don't have to worry, though, Nancy went on. I mean, if you're smart enough to get into Harvard and write papers for Jake Webb on the side, then... That got Hal's attention. What do you mean? He interrupted in a whisper. I don't know what you're talking about. Gee, I was sure I heard you and Jake talking about it in the hall right after that pop quiz, remember? No, you didn't. I mean, you must have heard wrong. Hal stood up, gathering his stuff together with shaky hands. Look, I've got to get going. Oh, too bad, Nancy said. I was going to ask your advice. See, I'll be taking the SATs soon, and I thought maybe you could give me some hints on how to handle them. Everybody says your scores were sky high. How did you do it? Or is that a secret? Hal looked so nervous, Nancy thought he might break down right there in the library. But he managed to hold himself together long enough to mumble something about luck. Then he rushed out of the room, but not before shooting Nancy a look of pure terror. Nancy wasn't sure what to make of it. Was Hal scared because of the SATs he'd stolen, or had he done something much worse than stealing and cheating? She decided to try again with him, but first she wanted to talk to the other 2. Walt Hogan wasn't hard to find. He stood out like a redwood in a grove of saplings, and she spotted him right before 5th period, heading out one of the side doors. Good, she said to herself. You were looking for an excuse to cut calculus anyway. Nancy followed Walt across the campus toward the track, where she watched him run 2 laps before he stopped, throwing himself down on the grass. He was gasping as if he'd just run a 3-minute mile, and she figured he must still be in pain. Tired? Nancy asked pleasantly as she dropped into the grass beside him. Yeah, Walt grunted a couple of times and then opened his eyes. Do I know you? Well, we met, Nancy said. Monday, remember? We sort of bumped into each other in the hall and Daryl Gray introduced us. I'm Nancy Drew. Yeah, sure. Walt didn't look sure at all. How's it going? Fine. Nancy plucked some grass and twisted it around her finger. I watched you at practice the other day, she said. You really amazed me. I mean, I fell off the trampoline and I could barely walk, so I know what you're going through. What do you mean? What am I going through? Walt asked. The pain, Nancy said. Jake Webb told me all about. Webb? Walt broke in. What kind of business do you have with that scum? No business, Nancy said quickly. He just explained about your injury, and I wanted you to know that I understand. Look. Walt jumped to his feet and stood towering over her. I don't know what that slime told you, but whatever it was, he was lying. Nancy got to her feet and faced him. Hey, okay, she said. Don't get excited. I just thought. Don't think, Walt shouted. He took a step toward Nancy, and for a second she thought he was going to hit her. Just get out of my sight. There's no pain because there's no injury. You understand? With an angry glance, Walt turned and slowly walked toward the school. Nancy let her breath out. She'd taken a few judo classes, but not nearly enough to prepare her to face a raging 200-pound football player. Walt was touchy, to put it mildly, but Nancy still didn't have anything more than suspicions to go on. No more hinting, she told herself. With Connie, just come right out and say what's on your mind. As horrible as the truth is, you have to confront her with it. At least you won't have to worry about being attacked. You hope.